it certainly seems as if the situation between him and the Jaguars is not looking particularly good. And I've got a quote here from Ian Rappaport as well, who said on his podcast, "I'm not sure if I've played my final game for the Jags yet, but or not. But my trade request still stands. Once respected loss to both parties, I think it is time to part ways." So, to be perfectly honest here, I don't no criticism at all for him wanting to be there for the birth of his daughter, but I'm not getting any indications that his long-term future is still with the Jags. I think that relationship between him, Marrone and Coughlin is undeniably broken for good at this point in time. He may finish this season with them, and he probably will, because I can't imagine Coughlin's going to want to lose a player of his caliber entirely if there's any chance of bringing him back, even for a few games. But I think his future's elsewhere.
Well, I mean, I know Doug Marrone personally, and I'm working closely with the Jaguars. Doug Marrone is certainly doing what he has to do as the lead man, talking on behalf of the franchise all the time, because he's obviously in the press conferences day in and day out. So he has to do it. Jalen Ramsey will finish out the year in Jacksonville. That's my belief. Beyond that, it's anybody's guess. But Jacksonville will not sell this guy cheap. They don't have to. He's still under club control, whether he likes it or not. So he has to deal with it. In terms of all his ailments this week when it comes to the flu 1 minute, now the birth of a child, I understand that. Life happens, okay? It really does. But in the end, Jalen Ramsey is under contract with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jalen Ramsey is collecting a paycheck from the Jacksonville Jaguars, okay? And if Jalen Ramsey wants to increase his value, it would be best for him to keep his mouth shut, okay, and not realize that the 31 organizations are watching his behavior to make sure that, is he the type of guy that is a disruptive force, or is he a guy that's a playmaker? We all know what he does on the field when he's on the field. He's a great player. He really is. But we're talking about so many petulant children here in this league, week in and week out, which unfortunately, Anthony, overshadows what's going on the football field, and that's an unfortunate shame. But, Ramsey won't be there in Denver. So what's it going to be next week? As you know, I send you a lot of material from my sources so that you can use it as a reference period. So that gives you an opportunity to evaluate and try to read into it and own. I don't expect you only to go ahead and give me nuts and bolts. And thankfully, you've been able to grow with us by being able to incorporate commentary. And that's where I think you'll continue to grow as an NFL commentator / broadcaster. So read into whatever you want to read into it. But if I were Jalen Ramsey, like Antonio Brown, it would be wise to keep your mouth shut and let your playing do the talking. And the other things will ultimately work out, except in the case of Brown where nothing's going to work out. So with that said, let's talk about Melvin Gordon.
Yes, Melvin Gordon, his holdout has finally ended. He obviously said he was comfortable sitting out this season or was forced through a trade or for a new deal. He's desperate for a higher deal. He feels he deserves to be paid more. Cost of the holdout in the end has cost him $1.2 million in fines. He's also lost a further $989,000 in base salary alone for the first 3 games. He will still earn $4.6 million of base salary for the rest of the season. He will also be a free agent after the season, but supposedly he plans to move on. Now, I have heard that it's been reported that he was open to a move to Houston, and I'm guessing that that's not come from nowhere. My guess is Houston certainly were interested in him as well, because they could have done with a running back like him. But LA supposedly were not interested, which does not surprise me one bit. They are very stubborn in that regard. And Austin Ekeler has done such a good job in his absence at running back that at the end of the day, my guess is Gordon simply saw the situation and went, well, they're really not, losing me has not done them any harm, to be perfectly honest. Austin Ekeler's been extremely good. So moving forward, after his return today, Coach Lynn said he's our starter, no doubt. He was our starter for a reason. As soon as Melvin's ready, he'll go back. He'll go back to number 1. He has also gone on to say that Ekeler and third choice Jackson will carry on playing and will get plenty of game time moving forward. But I think, if anything, this has just hurt his value, certainly among the Chargers. I think if the Chargers are going to try and bring him back at the end of this season, which I'm sure they'll still try to do, they're going to point out to how well the likes of Ekeler played this year and go, well, there are others that can do the same job as you. There are others that can thrive in this system as well. Maybe don't demand quite as much. So I can't necessarily rejoining the Chargers after this year. I think this may well be his last year in LA.
Yeah, so let me ask you a question. Let's talk about Sunday, Anthony. The Chargers are down in Miami at Hard Rock Stadium. Do you see Melvin Gordon suiting up and playing even a little bit to get going? What would you say?
I think he will a little bit, but I certainly don't think he'll start. Eckler's been so good, and Melvin Gordon's been off for such a long time now. He's not going to be game ready just yet, and even if he is, there's going to be a lot of rust there. I think maybe they bring him in for a few plays, see how he does, but I would still say they rely on Eckler because, again, no disrespect to the Dolphins intended, but at the end of the day, it is the Dolphins. We've seen how they played this year. They were decent in the first half against the Cowboys last week. Do not get me wrong, but they're not as good as, say, the Texans last week or anything before that, or coming after this week. It's not a difficult fixture from the Chargers' point of view. So I would say lean on Eckler as much as they can, and that would help ease Gordon back in. There's no point in rushing him back in, especially not in a game like this where the Chargers really should win it.
Well, you're not disrespecting the Dolphins, Anthony. You know why? They're simply outright bad. Period. They are. I mean, they're headed for a dark season. Everybody knows that. They all expect it in these parts, so that it is what it is. I could see maybe Gordon getting 8 to 10 carries and not a whole lot, just to kind of ease back into it. I could see that. So, it's one of those types of things that they're going to evaluate it. And let me tell you something, Anthony. I've been around this league long enough to know that. Do you think any coach or front office team is going to really let you know what a guy's availability is way before the fact, since they game plan in this sport more than any other sport on the planet?
No, certainly not. And, I think, like you said, I think 8 to 10 carries could well be accurate. We're not going to see a lot of him this week. Next week, I think, is the week to start looking out at him more closely. And if you've got him in your fantasy teams, maybe look at putting him in next week or the week after.
Yeah, let me tell you, Anthony, when I see players taking longer layoffs, and I'm talking about missing games, one that really immediately comes to mind is Dez Bryant, okay? How did that happen? How did it work out when he came back to New Orleans and finally played a game for the Saints? He was injured and he was done. What do these players really feel?
And that's what they're going to want to avoid at this point in time, is rushing him in too quickly, especially in, like I said, somewhat of a meaningless game. Don't rush him in. It's not worth it.
That's true. So, I mean, I think the player's smart enough to realize it. But, and the Chargers, obviously, to me, are a team that still is a playoff team. I think they definitely can be, and the season's long. They should get a win this weekend, but we'll see how it all plays out. And I know they want to be as competitive as they can as their new building with the Rams opens up next year. So I'm going to go drop a few other NFL notes your way, okay, Anthony? And just give me your observations, okay? You ready? All right?
Absolutely.
So I understand that the NFL dropped its proposal for an 18-game season, and they're focused on 17. And it's a proposal where they're talking about reducing 1 or 2 preseason games and the possibility of expanding the playoffs with 1 extra team per conference. That seems to be what they consider a suitable compromise to what they're looking to do. Do you see that actually taking place?
I think it's a little too early to say yes or no definitively, simply because we need to see what the collective bargaining agreement that they're obviously working on at the moment comes out to. Once that comes out, I think we'll have a much better idea of what they're going to do to the schedule. Now, I think getting rid of this 18-game idea is a good idea. That wasn't going to work. The way that they'd written it out was that no player could play more than 16 games in that 18 season, which simply wasn't going to work. We were going to get games of poorer quality, and it really was not worth it, and especially the extra wear and tear on the players. Now, I'm all for getting rid of a game or two in pre-season. I think a lot of coaches and certainly a lot of players will be for that indeed. Because at the end of the day, there are too many injuries in pre-season, too much unnecessary wear and tear on the players. It's just not necessary. Now, expanding the playoffs, I can certainly see happening simply for the fact, from the NFL point of view, it makes a lot of sense for them, simply because it's going to rake in a lot more money.
Right.
They can charge a lot more. They can charge a lot more for the advertising fees, and they're going to make a lot more in terms of marketing as well. So, from their point of view, this makes absolute perfect sense. From a fan's point of view, does it diminish the accomplishment of getting into the playoffs a little bit? Yes, for me it does. So do I love that about it? No. But on the other hand, you'll get more fans who get to see their team in the playoff games. You'll get more players who get to play in the playoff games. So maybe it's not such a bad thing. I still think, and I maintain, it's a bit too early to predict whether it is going to happen or not, because I want to see what the NFLPA has to say in their bargaining agreement with regards to games per year first.
I think two interesting dynamics of this whole subject, Anthony, are one, let's just say it does happen, you have 17 games instead of 16. It'll be interesting to see how the schedule makers work it out year in and year out. One team gets 9 home games, and then they go 9 road games the following year. And then where would that other game actually come from? I would think most likely either in the conference, or they could probably institute a game where you have a rivalry game. So I think, again, Anthony, this is nothing more than mere speculation from somebody that thinks, maybe that one game is a rivalry game every year where it rotates back and forth. Let's face it, I know you don't know a lot about baseball, but let's not kid ourselves. Interleague play does draw a lot more people, you know what I mean? And, it's an intriguing possibility. Now, I got to tell you where the age difference is between me and you, okay? Once upon a time, when I was a kid, long before you ever hatched out in the UK, they used to have 6 preseason games. Can you imagine that, Anthony Wood? 6 preseason games, everybody's whining about 4.
I can't imagine the fury that would come out from the NFLPA as a result of that nowadays. I cannot see that going down particularly well with today's players, can you?
Well, that is funny. Because I don't know how prevalent the NFLPA was back then when they had 6 games. And let's take it a step further, okay, Anthony? The NFL used to have 15 to 20 rounds for drafting, where now you're down to probably 7 with undrafted free agents. So when you talk about the dynamics and the logistics, Anthony, of how things have changed from where you're looking at them for where yours truly here is looking for them, it's certainly a different dynamic. And I don't know, man. I remember many years ago when they struck, and then you had players walking the picket line like Joe Montana, and all these guys realized that these game checks add up. Gordon knew that too, but I think the biggest thing with him is the fact that if he didn't come back, he would lose the accrued time, and that would delay his free agency. And I think from that standpoint, it worked out. We had a situation where Le'Veon Bell didn't really care, and he ended up walking, and then the Steelers didn't object to him anyhow, and they thought that they had their solution in James Conner. So again, the dynamics of what you're dealing with here are definitely interesting. And, we talked about Melvin Gordon, and let me validate your point with a couple of interesting facts, okay? Yes, he did lose 3 game checks, and without them, the Chargers produced 13th best running game in the league with 111.7 yards per contest. And obviously, you talked about the final year of his contract, and he had to report to the team by November 29th, so to accrue that extra service time. So, there's no question that there's definitely a lot of bad blood there. And, again, I talked about the Chargers going ahead and playing the Miami Dolphins to kind of get his feet wet. But I think that there is enough bad blood between the Chargers and Gordon that he will ultimately move on. To me, it would be anybody's guess where he would go. I know our friends up in Wisconsin would like to see him in a Packers uniform. But will the team that's owned by the stockholders ever give into that? I don't know.
Well, here's a suggestion for you then. Here's a little thought for you. Just obviously, I know we've only got a couple minutes left, but I've got to throw this out there. And this is, again, it's not anything that's come from anywhere. This is purely from my own very strange head. What if they were to introduce, as opposed to making the draft longer again and bringing back all those extra rounds, what if they were to do a 1 to 2 round draft of purely non-US players? Because there are more and more Europeans coming into the game now. There are quite a few Canadians in. There are quite a few Australians in. How about if we were to do something like that after the initial draft?
Well, for a guy that doesn't know anything about baseball, okay, baseball does the international draft to complement it as well. So
it does. It does.
So I like that idea. So you know what you're going to do after you get off tonight? When you come on next week, you and I are going to have a nice discussion about that. How does that sound, all right? Write it in your notes.
I'll go speak to the NFLPA as well, see what they think.
Well, do a little bit of research, okay? And that'll be one of our points of discussion next week. So, all right, Bill Winters is due any moment. So, Anthony, thank you very much. And think about what I said about the international draft pool. because that's certainly a point of discussion that we're going to elaborate on next week. Okay, Anthony?